I'm John Chowney with Campbellsville University, welcoming our audience back to the special segment of Dialogue on Public Issues. Dr. Aaron Thompson, President of Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, is our guest today, and looking forward to talking with him about post-secondary ed, higher ed in Kentucky, and getting an update. Welcome.
Welcome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Aaron.
Well, I am a product of Kentucky.
Yes.
Born in the hills of Appalachia in Clay County, Kentucky. Father was an illiterate coal miner. Mother had an 8th grade education. We were sharecroppers, very poor. My father got paid in script, and we raised our gardens, of course, on that sharecroppers farm. That's the way we ate throughout the year, raised our hogs. They killed them in November and had pork, so I'm a good old country boy. So first generation high school, obviously, and first generation college. So that's a little bit about me. I've been in Kentucky most of my career, been in higher education for 30 years, and really see myself very much as a Kentuckian through and through.
You've served both at the council where you are now, and we'll get into that momentarily, as well as actually in university life, as I understand.
Absolutely. I actually started my career at what is now BCTC, but LCC as a part-time instructor in University of Kentucky, part-time instructor. My first full-time venture in higher ed was at Eastern Kentucky University. And then after several years, I went to Missouri, where I did my stint in a research extensive university, and then EKU brought me back home as an administrator in the late 90s, 1997, and just kind of moved up the channel from there, both in administration and in the faculty ranks.
EKU is a good school.
It's an excellent
I have an
school.
MPA from there, so
well, that makes
I'm
it
partial
better.
to EKU.
Yes, absolutely.
You serve, of course, as I mentioned in the introductory comments, as president of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. Our audience may not be familiar. Those of us working in higher ed, we talk about CPE in our alphabetical points of reference, the acronyms. What's the mission of the council, and what are your duties as the president?
Good question, and as a matter of fact, our duties are long, so I won't give you all of those. I will just tell you in a nutshell, we were created in 1997 with the Post-Secondary Reform Act, as people still call it House Bill 1. Right. Some other notable movements at that time was creating the Kentucky Community and Technical College system, taking the community colleges from the University of Kentucky.
Somewhat controversial at the time.
Absolutely, remember it well, and then brought all the technical colleges and merged it and created that system. Well, the Council on Post-Secondary Education came out of the old Council on Higher Education that had some duties, but they gave us a lot more duties. One of the primary duties was basically to oversee public higher education, to set the strategic agenda for the state. We do things like set tuition, we coordinate programs, we approve programs, review programs. But the thing that I think we do mostly is to ensure that we have a good higher education system in Kentucky for our citizens. So I'm the chief representative, if you will, of higher ed for the state of Kentucky. We semi-govern the public institutions, both the 4-year and the 2-year, but one of the other things we do that we're proud of doing, we license our private nonprofits. Which Campbellsville is a part of it. So what we do is, we argue for the budgets, if you will. We distribute the money to the institutions, and in that process, we try to ensure that we have a good quality system for our students in Kentucky.
I'm sure you've heard Dr. Gary Cox articulate very well that the 18 nonprofits of IQ represent a system within itself, a very unique system. I'm sure you've heard that argument and probably agree with it in the context of what we represent collectively at the table.
Absolutely, and I know Gary well. I've known Gary for a lot of years. My son is actually going to school at a private nonprofit in the state. Very much believe that are private nonprofits are essential to getting the kind of educational attainment that we're going to have in Kentucky. So although we don't govern, we are very much interlocked with our private nonprofits. You are unique. The populations you serve are unique. Even though the interesting part of this, the private nonprofits are as diverse as our public institutions, right? Many, you know, like at Center College, for an example, really serving the traditional populations. And you look at a Campbellsville College, that you serve those and way beyond. And so the idea that we cannot have a good higher education system without you. But you are unique in that you don't accept public dollars. So you eat what you kill in many ways, right? And because of that, you've become really entrepreneurial, I think, in such a way that public institutions can learn from you.
Thank you. Now, during your time as CPE president, the past year and a half, what have been your top priorities, your top initiatives at CPE?
Well, you know, one of the things that, and the reason why I'm doing the listening tours, I want to find out what our public thinks about who we are and what we do. And so what I've garnered over the last year especially has been this idea that people really don't understand higher education. And we've not done a very good job of explaining it to them. When I go to some of the areas I go to, they talk about, well, I'm not college material. And then once I talk to them in great depth, they're thinking that I'm not a person that wants to go on a 4-year campus and live in a residence hall and do that. So a part of what we have to do is really expose them to what higher education is. The other thing I found out on the tour, so part of what I've been trying to do is to put value back in this value proposition. So many people that don't understand the value of higher ed. So my job is to let people know exactly the value, and as you well know, tons of value. I mean, not only do you make more money over your lifetime, your sons and daughters end up being in better places in their lifetime, as well as, in fact, you have better health, you have better civic engagement, a lot of benefits. You don't go to prison as often, nor are you on Medicaid as often. So there's a lot of benefits to higher ed, but the other thing I found out is there's a perception that higher education is not affordable. So affordability has become an issue for me. And not only is there a perception, when I hear that, people are saying I really just don't know how to fund it, right? So they look at the sticker price and not understand that institutions like yours and public institutions, there is a net price, which is a lot lower than the sticker price. So we haven't done a very good job of letting people know that. So affordability. The other thing is about quality. The idea that we have to start letting people know who we are and what it means and the value of that, but we also have to get employers in on the front end of this conversation. We've left out business and industry, I think, in the way that we've forged our programs and even our efforts. So part of what I've done over the last year is bring business in on the front end of this conversation, talking about what can we do and how can we build a program and students that not only reach the levels of competencies for your technical areas, but also for the employability areas, the critical thinking and problem solving. And the third is really reaching out and saying that we can't leave people behind. If we leave people behind because of income, because of race, because of age, then we haven't done a very good job. So equity from the standpoint of trying to get everybody engaged in a higher educational attainment has been our real focus for me over the last year.
Don't you think, Dr. Thompson, that public policy is being driven in that direction? Obviously from your perspective in the CPE, but even at the congressional level, federal level, and it would appear at the state level, public policy, the funding is moving in that direction of more accountability, more transparency, more emphasis on the employability of graduates, and more transparency on the loan, paying back loans and so forth by students.
Without a doubt it is. And this is the argument that I even talk with all of our campuses about, including private nonprofits, that we need to be on the front end of this conversation, not just let public policy be driven on the back end.
Exactly.
So we have to become a part of this conversation to make sure that everybody understands how this really should work and how it will work. The example that I give is like on student debt. There's absolutely nothing wrong with student debt if in fact you borrow the right amount for the degree you get, and you get that degree, and you get a job that's sustainable, right? Then it's an investment.
Right.
Where we fail miserably is helping them to understand, I think, exactly how much they should be borrowing for a particular degree, what those jobs that are available to them with that degree, no matter what that degree is, and in fact, helping them to get through to that finish line. If they drop out before, then I think we've not done our job nearly as well as we should. Now, we can't take all the blame, obviously,
right,
but that's part of it. But public policy is, as you all know, we have a performance funding system that's very, very heavily accountable driven, that focuses on how we move that dial more in those directions. And I'm proud to say that our public universities and campuses have really stepped up, both community colleges and 4 years, to respond to that.
And I think you're familiar with a program that Dr. Cox and some of the privates have done in terms of looking at costs per program, and I think Dr. Carter, our president, made a presentation to CPE not too many months ago on what we're doing here at Campbellsville in that context, in terms of looking at every program and looking at the cost of graduating a student in that program, and then looking at the employability of those students and tracking that, and also looking at the debt load per program.
John, absolutely, and I was so impressed with President Carter's and Gary's presentation on this, so much so that we've now launched a very similar with Gray and Associates for all of our programs in our public universities, because it is about transparency. It is about what is the return on investment.
Right.
But it is also about quality, and I don't want people or listeners to not understand that.
Right.
This is not just about looking at this purely as a business proposition. This is about saying that, how do I know as a student or as a parent or as a spouse that my student that's getting that degree is seeing the value in that degree, and that is as big of a proxy for quality as I can think of. But I love the transparency that I saw with what you folks undertook to look at program review to that level.
For us to make decisions on programming, we need to know what it's costing us.
That's right.
And that's not to say the more expensive programs will be done away with. But again, if you only have a single graduate in a high-cost program, there's a question mark there that a decision needs to be made. Nursing, for example, is a high-cost program per graduate, but there's employability, immediate, and there's a need. It's part of the mission, both of public entities. And as President Carter often says, we are a private nonprofit Christian institution, but we serve a public purpose.
Well, you do, and it's a public good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it doesn't mean just because, as you said, we're looking at the cost per program, doesn't mean that it's purely a cost decision. But some of these other programs are subsidizing, in a sense, some of the more costly programs that are a part of the mission and that are needed.
Well, that's right, and that's why I tell people that, I'll use English for an example, not only is it a necessary program, it's a program that actually helps other programs that are necessary that may cost more.
Right.
So it's not as bifurcated as we've heard, that it's all about how many people that can get employed and how much money they make. It's about being transparent and saying that if you do get an English degree, here are the programs, here are the jobs you can get with that. This is the return on investment, how much you should borrow for that. And it gives you a chance as a campus administrator to understand how to use your money better. It is, in fact, a good business model, but it's not purely about a business decision in that sense, the return on investment purely from a profit standpoint, unless you look at profit as being more than just money. The other piece that I like about what you folks did and what we're trying to do, it also identifies holes that we can fulfill for that public need. You know, what majors do we need to have for 5, 10 years down the road that we need to be building on now? And how can we get employers engaged to help us to do that? So yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing this up, because we've gotten lost in this bifurcated way of thinking about STEM programs good, humanities bad. That's not.
No, that's not
the way it is at all.
Exactly.
Right. So for us, that's why we've embarked on this program review system that you all led the way on.
Well, we're glad to be a part of it. And one of the things that I think we're all realizing in the post-secondary education is, and I know that you're leading the way on this, is that we want everybody on a career path.
That's right.
And we want a career path that leads to gainful employment and sustainable employment, and that will encourage those folks to become lifelong learners and to improve themselves along the way. But everybody doesn't necessarily need to go to college, quote, a four-year college and get a four-year degree coming out of high school. Certainly we want to empower those who want to do so and need to do so and want to pursue a path that requires that. But everybody does. We don't have to judge everyone by that standard.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that not everybody's a four-year college person. I am one of those people that argue that everybody needs a post-secondary credential that matters.
Absolutely.
You know, not just a credential, but one that matters. And how do we know that it matters? Well, a variety of ways. The surest way is that they are on a pathway toward a career or sustainable employment. For us not to say, I know of no one going to college. I'm a liberal arts guy, but I know of no one going to college unless they wanted to get out and get a job and to live, right, and to raise a family. So a part of the conversation I think we have to be having in higher education is saying, honestly, how do we build that pathway? And I think P12 has to help us because to me that conversation needs to start at least in middle school. And we've got access to these population groups from inside of our institutions, like with dual credit and a variety of other things. We should be aligning paths. And I'm not talking about tracking, John. This is where people get the conversation mixed up. As a matter of fact, I think every child, if possible, should be exposed to at least a career that gives them an idea that they may have interest in it. Doesn't mean they have to decide a major before that, but in higher education, I think we have to work closer with P12. P12 needs to work closer with us, and we are. Wayne Lewis and I are working really close together to design multiple pathways, and not just toward a technical field, but also toward an opportunity to get a credential that may not be in a technical field that can use.
How do you think our post-secondary ed system is doing in Kentucky, our major strengths and the challenges we face?
Well, you know, and I'm going to speak from a very macro level and get very micro on that question because I think it's an excellent question. You know, I think we haven't been as aware as we needed to be in the past. We've kind of lived within our bubble for a little too long, and now we've had 11 straight years in public, with our public institutions being cut, about $222 million nominal dollars, $437 million inflationary dollars. And we've been forced into probably thinking more entrepreneurial like you guys have been doing for a while, and that's good. Now we've been efficient to a point of where it's hurting. We're going to have some more money infused in the public higher education. But I don't think we've done a very good job of talking about higher education as a whole being a solution. We're funding a lot of the symptoms. And we need to somehow fund both in public. I mean, I think you folk need a lot more financial aid dollars to help you to do what you need to do. So the idea that we are now talking and getting back on track. We only have about 53.3% of high school graduates going on to college. Post-secondary, we have to get more engaged in thinking about how do we increase that. We've got to get more engaged in thinking about how to be more entrepreneurial in the programs that we're offering and how to reach out in what I call a very diverse way, not wait on students to show up on our campus, but what you guys have done very well is saying, no, we're going to be proactive. We'll come to you. And so we're getting better along those lines. As a whole, if you look at how well those people in Kentucky that has gotten a post-secondary credential, how well they've withstood the economic downturn and the jobs and the money that they're making, then I'm going to argue we've done a pretty good job. But what we haven't done in Kentucky, and I'm talking to Vivek Soren, who's the head of economic development, we're on the same page on this. You don't have a great economic development system unless you have a great higher education system. And that's what we're trying to build. We're more focused now than we've ever been John. So I'm going to say in the past we've been okay. But, and in some cases been excellent. In some cases not so good, both public and private institutions, and you know all the ones we're talking about. But I will tell you, we are all on the same page now, pushing this connection between a good post-secondary credential and a good economic development system. And so we are getting better and we're more focused.
Do you think we are, at least strategy-wise, policy-wise, moving to the point where we will retain our own graduates, keep them in Kentucky? I mean, my friend Hal Rogers, I've known him for 45 years. And
so have I.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right.
And we both grew up in the 5th Congressional District. I on the west end of the old 5th District, as I call it, and you on the east end of the current and Appalachia. But the brain drain of eastern Kentucky and southern Kentucky, where I come from, and rural Kentucky in general, and then Kentucky as a whole. Are we progressing there? Are we, with all this emphasis on education and economic development, are we keeping our best and brightest at home, keeping them here, retaining?
You asked two particular questions. I think both are very valid. I don't think we focused on that nearly as much as we needed to in the past. We're clearly focused on that now. But we're also focused on it from the other end of this conversation, from the economic development and workforce development. You know, what we realize is that we're never going to get to where we need to go in Kentucky unless we do keep them. So now we're developing everything from apprenticeships to work-based learning experience, designing pathways from P-12 to higher ed. So we are focused on that, but we're also, we know this for sure. We're going to have to get more students out of state to come in state to stay in state.
Sure.
So we're focused on that too. We're focused on student success. And the more we get people to the finish line, the more we know now they'll stay in Kentucky. More jobs we create in a booming economy, that not only are the jobs of just right now, but those jobs that we know are developing in the tech world and other places for 5-10 years down the road, they will stay. So absolutely, I think as a matter of fact, you know, and I think this governor's done a really good job of focusing us on what are those industry needs that we currently have, that we can get people in them currently. Also, and I call it a both and, not just neither or, but us focusing with our, because four-year institutions are also what I call a workforce engine. Sure. So how are we getting ourselves, even with these employability outcomes in all of our majors, that they will be ready to move into these high-tech positions 5-10 years down the road. So we are more than ever.
Are there strategies that are being looked at and implemented within the context of all that's being done that will impact rural Kentucky? I don't want to get off onto my soapbox about rural Kentucky, and I'm not one of those that's rural Kentucky versus the Golden Triangle. But, you know, metro, the urban areas can compete relatively well educationally and economic development wise. But rural Kentucky, where you come from, where I come from, in many ways they're falling further and further behind. Campbellsville, for example, is like an island of growth, not rapid growth, but the university as well as the community and the county. But we're surrounded by decline, economic decline. No offense, with the exception kind of with a couple of communities. But, you know, to our south and to our east, counties are losing population, for example. And that's just a point. That's kind of a soapbox of mine, personally, coming from the nearest town to where I come from was 14 miles. I grew up on a farm in rural Kentucky. And so it's a passion of mine to see those educational opportunities and somehow meshing post-secondary education and retention of some of the best and brightest. And as well as enabling all of our people the opportunity to maintain good employment opportunities at home.
You know, excellent question, and I will not be shy about addressing. There is a difference between what's going on in our rural communities and what's going on in our urban communities. For us not to say that, it's just
it's a national issue. It's not just a Kentucky issue.
It is, but I'm from Clay County, Kentucky.
Absolutely.
I'm from Central Appalachia.
I'm from Cumberland County, Kentucky.
So you know,
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
so it is a very personal issue for me. And what I see us is trying to do that more, but we still haven't gotten that movement down to where I feel comfortable with it. And I'll give you some examples. I'm the vice chair of the corporate Baptist Healthcare, and in a year or so be the chair of it. And I tell you, we have so many needs to have nurses and other medical professions that we can train in those areas, that we will give them jobs in those areas.
Right.
So we're starting to focus on those things that we know we can immediately build. And if we start doing that, then we can start building the economic region up. And I know that Congressman Rogers and a variety of other folks are concerned about this. So the idea, though, I think we have to be what I call a bifurcated focus. We have to think about how do we bring people to the community to build jobs, but we're also going to have to figure out how to educate the people in the communities to get into those jobs. And so it's people say chicken versus egg, call it whatever you will, I don't really care.
Exactly.
But that we're more focused, I think, now than we've ever been, but we need to be far more focused than we've ever been.
We can't just write off rural America and rural Kentucky.
If we do, it's the worst economic process we would ever do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Higher education has changed over the past 5 to 10 years dramatically. Our president, Dr. Carter, often says there's been more dramatic change in the last 5 years, for example, than in his entire career previously. Comment on that.
Well, mine too, I will tell you, and I've been in this for a long time. It's moving so fast, partially because of the way that we've become so global, and the ways that we've become so global even, in the way of social media and variety. People have choices. You have this rise of these mega post-secondary institutions that people can get access to any sort of degree or certificate as they want to, anywhere they want to. So how are we competing with that at a localized level? We're having to think differently, and you guys are, by the way, and how we are now reaching out and maintaining quality while we're doing that. So yeah, the internet has changed the way we're doing business now more than ever. The other thing too is the way that we think about globalization. The way we look at information, the way we use information, automation. I mean, robots are taking certain jobs that people used to do. But what we fail to realize, and higher education is getting this, we can create more jobs to take care of those robots. So we have to move faster toward that 5-year thought process down the road than just responding to our current item. So we've been forced in the last 5 years to start thinking strategically in that direction.
Dr. Aaron Thompson, thank you, sir.
John,
we're out of time. We have to do this again.
I look forward to it.
Indeed. This is John Chowning for Dialogue on Public Issues with Dr. Aaron Thompson, the president of the Council on Post-Secondary Education, thanking our audience for being with us once again.